Okay, so tonight's topic is mutuality on relating. Okay, so I was thinking that this topic actually might be connected to last week's parsha, which involved was kedoshim, and it is a classic verse of "Ahavta l'reacha kamocha," to love your neighbor as yourself. And it's interesting because the idea is the standard for loving someone else is yourself. There's a concept there in terms of balancing between the individual and the other, and we've talked about this before, as we've talked about chayecha kodem, that there are times you have to take care of yourself first, there are times you take care of others, and so forth. There's a balancing of that. And what that really ties into is the very concept of love, which we have, which we've talked about to some extent. And I really want to look at that concept from an ethical perspective. Because, as we've mentioned a few times, we are influenced from the Christian concept of love, which is basically selflessness. That love is an aspect of caring for another. And that leads into the ethical definition of the person of someone who cares solely about the other, is the highest ethical value. In the sense that I place aside myself and I take care of another. And that's a classic concept in terms of Christian thought. In the sense that the religion focuses on the selflessness of a person in relating to the other, that the other should take precedence, and that's the way we often look at it. We often look at the ethic being the other, the ethic being that the ethical person basically places the other over themselves, and that seems to be a perspective. Okay, from a Jewish perspective, though, the idea of "Ahavta l'reacha kamocha" basically arises from the idea that there's a mutuality. There's actually to be a connection. Now, this actually arises from the model of love, or what is the ideal of love in the Jewish perspective. So, in the Christian perspective, the idea of love is the ideal of love is considered to be the parental model, which is understood to be that the parent negates self in order for the child, and that's what you see. That's why the clergy in a Christian model is based upon parental terms, father, mother. The idea being that the perception being that the parent negates self for the child, which basically comes from the person themselves. It's the individual themselves, the parent, who basically is driven to negate self for the child, for the parent, for the child, in terms of placing the child's concern above themselves. Fact is from the Torah model, the model of love is actually marital love, romantic love. This is perceived to be from Shira Shirim. The idea of Shira Shirim being that the ideal relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu is actually the perception of husband and wife as considered to be the highest form of love. And that is extremely interesting, because what is the highest form of love from a Jewish perspective? And this really is contrary to the Christian idea. It is the concept of romantic love, is the concept of sexual love. In other words, the highest form of love from a Jewish perspective is modeled on the concept of sexuality. Okay, so you see that from Shir Shir, which is in many ways uses eroticism to reflect love between the Jewish people and God. The point is what really is that concept of love? So you have to look at the very starting point of that definition of love. It is obviously the idea, the concept of or the idea of love as expressed in the relationship between Adam and Chava, between Adam and Eve. And here is where you have the starting point of that concept of relating and that concept of love. Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry about that. But the idea being that Adam is told that it's not good for you to be alone. You need someone else. And therefore what you have is the idea of unity. And therefore you have this idea, you should not be alone. Therefore God created an Ezer Kenegdo, He created another being to have a relationship with. Now, the point is in that relationship, it is obviously of a sexual and a procreational nature. Okay, Adam and Chava become the parents of all humanity, and their relationship is a relationship of connection. Now, the point being, though, is that relationship is a matter of actually connecting. If Yoshabir Soloveitchik makes a very significant point in terms of understanding how the love between Adam and Chava is connected to procreation. So a lot of people want to say that the purpose of the relationship between husband and wife, the purpose of sexuality between husband and wife, is to create the child. In other words, people want to say the purpose of sex is procreation. Rabbi Soloveitchik turns it the other way around. He says the idea of having a child as a result, or as the outcome of a relationship between husband and wife, is the child as a reflection of the unity between the husband and wife, the unity of the man and the woman. The reason that sexuality, the unity of the male and the female, results in procreation is because the child is reflective of the unity of the parents. The child is reflective of the unity of the male-female relationship. It's reflective of the highest form of love, which is the unity of the male and the female. That's what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. Okay, so the point is that the concept of love from a Jewish perspective is not the selflessness of the Christian concept of love. The idea of love from a Jewish perspective is in the relating between the two human beings, okay, the male and the female, in the forming of a unity. And that love is basically an aspect of the unity of two beings. That's why, in a certain way, selflessness does not create unity. Selflessness basically says, okay, I will care for you, but it does not create unity. Unity is a function of two human beings connecting with each other. And unity has to be a result of the mutuality in terms of that tune between the individuals. Love leads to the relationship between male and female. Love is reflective of the formation of community. Love is reflected in the formation of family. The point being is that the core of love is that mutuality between the two centers of love, the male and the female, the husband and wife, the mother and father, and then the creation of the community that flows from it. Okay, now that community has different aspects of how they relate and how they form this connection between the parties to the community. But the point is that it's in the formation of that community that basically you have it. And the thing is the essence of that, and this is where it's really found in that original mutuality or the original connection between Adam and Chava, is in the idea of connection and the idea of being aware of each other's needs. See, it's a very interesting idea, because what happens is one of the problems or the reasons Christians had problems with sexuality was because, first of all, obviously it was physical, okay, and it took away from their limited view of spirituality. But obviously it also involved, what do you call it, the perception concern for self in terms of self-pleasure, in terms of sexuality. But the fact is that the two members in the sexual relationship both come together in terms of their own self-interest. They're both driven for their own pleasure, and both are to be concerned about the other's pleasure. But it's not at the expense of each other. The idea being is that the ultimate form of that unity is the fact that you have two people concerned about their own pleasure and the other's pleasure. And that's where you have this idea of mutuality and the idea of unity. Okay, in terms of the ultimate expression of that unity is that both individuals meet their goal together. That is really the ultimate definition of community. It's the ultimate definition of a oneness. It is not in terms of it's me or you, which is when you focus on selflessness and selfishness, it's this idea of me and you. It's the idea of we want to come together to meet both our needs together. And that's ultimately the highest form of community. Now, can that be achieved in every aspect of how a community connects? Not necessarily. There will always be certain people who are better off in the community. There's other people who are less off in the community. But the idea is that this is where the ultimate idea of the bonding of a community. The objective is not selflessness or selfishness. The objective is in mutuality of the bonding of the community. And that comes about through the parties in that community being concerned about themselves and being concerned about the other. And that's reflective in the male-female relationship. The male-female relationship is not concern for self or concern for other, it's concern for the unity. And the ultimate expression of that is when both are happy within the unity. Okay, there's mutuality, and that's reflective in proper sexuality. And that's found in halachic ideas. That the halacha speaks about the concerns individuals within the relationship have for each other. So you actually see this in terms of halachic definitions. You know, there's a lot of perception within religious understanding of sexuality that you try to limit it. You know, there's all these bubamaises about how religious people try to limit the sexuality of pleasure. The fact is if you look at the halacha, the obligation of the husband and the obligation of the wife is to try and ensure each other reaches certain sexual pleasure because you want to share the pleasure. There's an interesting idea that sort of plays on this, which I find interesting. There's a Gemara that says that for the strength of the baby, there is value in a having a positive sexual experience with her husband. In other words, that sexual pleasure for a pregnant woman will have a positive effect upon the baby.
Now, why is that?
Well, I don't know if that's medically true or not, but um, um,
Okay, I'll get to that in a sec.
um, okay.
Um, okay, um, okay. Let me get to that sec, Stephen. The fact
Is that there's a concept
of connecting between the two people. Stephen is asking me a question. Okay, let me just. He's basing.
Okay, Stephen is asking, can you mention the concept of celibacy and the
Jewish viewpoint. Um,
I'm not exactly sure of the context. Um,
the perception is that there's value in
within Jewish thought of the male-female relationship. It's not good for a person to be alone. Therefore, there's value in a man and a woman becoming a unit together and basically being
in a marriage. In the marriage,
If you're asking, is there any value in celibacy in the marriage? No. Okay, it is expected that a husband and wife will have sexual relations. If they choose to
be celibate, then they choose to be celibate. But the point
is that nowhere in Judaism does it say that a husband and wife should be celibate. There's a concept of husband and wife. What?
What I'm referring to, what is our concept of celibacy in other religions? Is it something that is not acceptable? Complete celibacy
okay,
in Christianity, for
okay,
example.
okay. Let's not
Deal with other religions. Let's first understand the value of Judaism. Now, from the value of Judaism, are you saying there's a value? Do we think there's a value in what other people do? That's something. It's like
You're touching upon another question. Does Judaism have
perceptions of the values of other religions.
no? Judaism has
A perception of its own values. Now, its own values make a distinction between Jews and non-Jews. There's a Noahide code and there's a Torah code. Then, what you're saying is, how does Judaism evaluate other religions? Well, basically, pursuant to its own code.
so. If another religion
Adopts the Noahide code, great. If another religion
doesn't adopt the no,
Noahide code, then we are not happy with other religion. I mean, if you're asking how, does Judaism look and say, does not have an opinion about Christianity? Of course Judaism has an opinion about Christianity.
Christianity, okay, and then and
The
the
fact is that Christianity um, um, meeting the Noahide code is looked upon positively. Then you read into ideas where is Judaism
basically a religion that evaluates others.
well, it doesn't have the same idea of saying you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. It doesn't do that. Judaism
Judaism looks at a person and says, okay, is the person maintaining is doing as best as they can? An individual
who you know, doesn't know about certain things. Well, how can you evaluate them? The point is that
it's like I don't want to get into this
issue.
like for example, how does Judaism look upon the Trinity? Okay, so does it consider the Trinity to be a form of idolatry?
Yes and no. There are people who basically believed it was idolatry. The Rambam held that Trinity was absolutely idolatry. There's other viewpoints that perceive the Trinity
Trinity to not be an
idolatry in terms of that
Noachites are
culpable for. So there are viewpoints that say the Trinity is obviously idolatry for Jews, but
non-Jews who abide
by the Trinity it's not idolatry because with what they're doing is they're attaching other concepts to God. Therefore, but is it
the highest?
so they basically
So the viewpoint of the Ramah basically
says Moshe Isserles
basically says that a non-Jew who believes in the Trinity cannot be is not defined as a person who's an idolater. Is it correct? No.
okay, they should get
The idea, but even at that point in time,
Judaism has ideas of how you evaluate people. So Johannes Reuchlin, who is a devout Christian, is considered to be
one of the righteous,
the Gentiles. Okay,
because of how he acted with the
Jews and even though he was
a devout Christian. Okay, the point is we're not so much
into evaluating individuals and so forth. We evaluate their ideas. Judaism
does not look upon
celibacy as a value. That's true. Now, when I say Judaism doesn't look upon celibacy as a value, at the same point in time, it understands that there's only one proper way of not being celibate. For a Jew, it's in the husband-wife relationship. Okay.
Okay, without getting into complications or whatever, this topic is much more complicated. But
generally, it's a husband-wife relationship. The point is, if you're not in a married relationship, then the Jew
should be celibate. That would be a generally accepted law. But the point is then you can get into the issue: what about a non-Jew?
Does a non-Jew have to be celibate? No, but the fact is, it's still, you see from Adam and Chava that the highest form of the relationship
is when there's a unity. The idea is
when they're husband and wife. Okay, celibacy is a drive. I'm sorry, the marriage relationship or the sexual drive is a drive to connect with another human being.
Okay, in our world today,
there's so many people. It's
one of the great problems
that exists in our world today, because you can procreate outside of sexuality, you can procreate without any idea of a relationship, and you can basically
the physical drive
of sexuality is not seeing anything but connecting with another human being.
So the point is that it sees as people as just a physical drive. In Judaism, the drive is a
threefold drive.
It is the drive to connect
to another human being.
It's a drive to procreate,
and it's a drive, and it is a physical drive. And when the drive
is met in a unified fashion,
where you basically have the fulfillment of the physical need and the fulfillment of the procreative need
and the fulfillment of
the
union need, then that's
the highest form of the drive. Okay, when people who are it's clear though that people who are past childbearing age, or people
or there's a situation where there's a determination not to be procreative, the drive still has
value. Okay, as a physical drive, and as a drive of union.
So a husband and wife,
even if they're not procreating, that drive is still of value. Okay, because it's a value of union. Harold, you want to say something?
No? Okay. Well, if you do you want to say something? No. Okay. So the point is what I'm getting
at, though, this is a very different definition of love. It's a definition of love in union.
Okay, and it's
basically understood to be
aspects of the union
and the connection of the union, and in many ways it talks about the relationship between the giver
and the taker,
or the active part and the passive part. Okay, this is also, and I'll give you another example of this from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Very interesting statement.
In Pirkei Avos we have
a statement of one of the Tanaim that says that I learned a lot from my Rebbe, from my teacher. I learned a lot from, was this Rabbi Tarfon who said this one?
I learned a lot from,
I learned more from my Chavrusa, from my partner learning, but I learned
most from my
students.
And Rabbi Soloveitchik points this out very interesting. Now, what's the difference between a teacher and a student? The teacher is the giver of the information. He's the active role. He plays the active role in the educational process. Okay? The student... hello? The student is in the passive role in the situation, in the relationship. He's in the passive role. He's the recipient. There's a mic that's on. Okay? The point... Why am I being repeated? Stephen, are you muted?
No, I've done something. Fix what I did. I don't know. My mic is open. I don't know how it happened. There's my mic.
Yeah, it's a real problem here.
Okay, it's off.
No, it's not off.
It
Okay.
is.
No, it's not off, Stephen. There's someone else on?
Wait 1 second.
Okay. We interrupt this for
Technical problems.
Okay. So the point is that what's occurring, what Rabbi Soloveitchik points out, is that there's the active role in education, there's a passive role in education, and he compares that to the male aspect of in education and the female aspect, in terms of the teacher being like the male in terms of active, and the student being the female in terms of passive. But Rabbi Tarfon says, I think it's Rabbi Tarfon, says that I learned most from my students, because the point is in the relating there is connection. Okay, and that also applies in the educational model. The educational model is not supposed to be just a dictatorial statement. It's not just to flow one way. But the point is that in the connection of education, there's a give and take, and that's what unity is about. And that's where you eventually have the concept of, again, another concept of mutuality. In learning, there is mutuality. There's a give and take, and that from the other that you are, or let's say as a teacher teaching, in the response you also learn something. Because the point is that in terms of love from the Jewish perspective, or relating in terms of the creating of a unity, the idea is give and take. Okay, it's not just giving and it's not just taking, and the ideal is for we have in let's say the normative Western model is the idea of the ethic being in the giving. The fact is that if it's only in the giving without seeing potential for taking, potential for receiving, the potential for unity, then you're missing the point of what the ethic is ultimately about. I know a case, or heard of a case, of an individual who is someone who always had guests on Shabbos. He was a machnis orach, just tremendous person, took in guests and so forth. But he never accepted he never accepted an invitation. I want to give people and so forth, but he never accepted an invitation. And he was only machnas orach to someone was basically saying, I give to people who need. But he would also invite friends or something like that. But he never went over to someone else's house. The point is that's not right. It's not right. Because the fact is you have to give the opportunity to someone else to give to you in order to create the idea of communal bond. And that leads to an interesting idea. There's a concept expressed in Mishlei, in Proverbs, called Sonem Matanos Yechia. A person who hates gifts will live. There is a concept of taking care of yourself. There's an idea of not overextending yourself to be a taker. Okay? And that idea of Sonem Matanos Yechia, what some commentators explain is that you should not be a taker because you don't know if the person giving is giving with a full heart. And if a person is not giving with a full heart, it's not a real gift. So the point is that the reason you should be cautious whenever you take a gift is whether the person really means it or not. Okay? Now, that's a caution that exists. There's other factors involved as well, and so forth. Okay? The point is that the same type of concept. There's a concept in Jewish law of not being a taker. Therefore, you should give when rather than just being a taker. So the idea is that there's a concept of giving. On the other hand, there's a concept of not just being the concept of being so concerned about giving that you don't take when it's appropriate to take. So the point is that concept of Sonem Matanos Yechia is clearly mentioned in all the commentators and so forth, that if you don't, should not be someone who never takes, because there are situations where it is important to take. Okay, a person is trying to reach out to you and give you a present to show their affection for you. So, for example, on Purim, okay, there's a concept of Mishloach Manot on Purim, of sending gifts to others. Now, in terms of sending gifts to others, it's very interesting. Okay, we don't have a specific bracha on sending gifts. The fact is, there's a whole question in terms of where we don't say brachas. We don't say brachas, for example, when we give charity. Okay, if you're about to give charity to someone, you don't sit there and say a bracha. Okay, latate staka, or all staka, or whatever. You don't make a bracha. Why? Because in order to complete the mitzvah, the ani, the poor person, has to take the staka. Therefore, you can't make a bracha beforehand because you don't know if you're actually going to do the mitzvah because the person it may not take it. There is a concept, though, in Mishloach Manot, in giving gifts to others. The fact is, if you give gifts to others, if the person refuses to take the gift, you've still done the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Okay, so that's an interesting case over there. So you can't give that answer so simply by Mishloach Manot. Because what's Mishloach Manot? It's you expressing your caring for another person. Okay, it's not dependent upon the other person taking it. It's dependent on you giving it to them and expressing your love, your care for the other person. Okay, but the point is there's no bracha. So the 3-day Aish, Chil Yaakov Weinberg said the reason there's no bracha is because he gave the answer because the mitzvah is not just because anytime you say the bracha you say Asher Kisham Mitzvah B'Tzivanu. You made us holy and you commanded us. So a bracha should really be motivated because God ordered you to do it. In the case of Mishloach Manos, it's not just that God ordered you to do the action. The point is to really understand that action, you have to do it because you care for the other person. You actually care. Mishloach Manos should come from your heart. Therefore, you can't just say a bracha, it has to come from your heart. Okay? It has to be an aspect of you giving. Okay, now the truth is, at that point, as I told you, the person taking the gift, okay, doesn't have to take the gift, but the fact is there's a concept of taking the gift as well. Okay? Okay. Why? Because the idea is the person is showing you caring, showing you love. And you have to respond you should respond by taking the love. Hold on one second. I just want to turn on the light here for a second. Excuse me. Okay. That's better. Hopefully about that. I'm sorry about that. but I started before sundown. Anyways, but the fact is that that's what it means to have unity. You have to be a person who's involved in giving and taking. Okay? That's a Jewish concept of love because it's a form of unity between two individuals. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. It's an aspect of the connection between you and the other. Okay? It is not just simply being selfless. It's not just simply being I care for others. You have to understand that what you're really trying to do is create a connection between human beings. The ultimate form of that connection is in the relationship between husband and wife. But that's really what we want to do. We want to create a unity and connection in terms of family, community, and so forth. It's the idea of building a oneness of human beings. And that's what the Jewish concept of love is about. Okay? So that's what I mean when I say the term mutuality. It's a matter of connecting between the individuals. Okay, let me see if I have any comments. Anyone, any comments on this? No comments? Stephen, did I answer your question about celibacy or not? Didn't really answer your question. You're asking what we feel about celibacy. Yeah, we believe that all human beings are better off in a relationship. Okay. No concepts, no questions? Pretty straightforward. Harold, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, surely, Rabbi. According to the Torah, the first words are
first command.
Sorry?
The first command.
The first commandment. So surely, from the Torah itself, it seems to give a strong indication that celibacy is not something it aspires to.
Absolutely. But the fact is that statement. You're raising an interesting issue because of Puravu. The fact is, it flows from the connection of Adam and Chava. Right. And the fact is what you're talking about is a positive force. See, it's an interesting idea. Because it says, go forth and multiply and conquer the world. The fact is okay, because Kishuha means conquering the world. The point being is there's an idea of building civilization. There's an idea of developing, and that's really a reflection of the unity of humanity. It's an interesting idea. A lot of people find it interesting in terms of the husband-wife relationship, because in many ways people think the husband-wife relationship is insular. Okay, in the sense that, and it is insular in many ways. It is a unique relationship that's an insular. But the point is the relationship is also considered to be very powerful and considered to be a very strong force in the creation of life on earth, not just in having children, but in terms of developing civilization. One sec, Stephen. The point is that we believe that, and this is it, that the force of the love of the individual, love is not just supposed to be a personal feeling. It is combining the individual in terms of an energy in the world, from love and from creation of that. You're basically supposed to go forth and create civilization, conquer the world. Stephen, you want to say? Harold, did you have a comment or further? I think you're right. But the point is, it's a different understanding of love. It's a very different understanding of love than we think about love. Okay?
But the rabbis of the Talmud understood that as well.
Absolutely. I'm not saying anything that I don't think is fundamental to Jewish thought. Okay? It's Harold. I'm not saying anything that's not found in the Talmud. So when you sit there and say, "Hey, that idea is in the Talmud," yeah, I know. It's where I got the idea from. Right? Okay, so Stephen, you want to say something?
Yeah, so Harold took it one step further. It's in the same, I feel it's in the same line of thinking, my original question, but I'll take it even one step further. my question to you is it not uh, uh, just a commandment that we should be fruitful and multiply, but even more than that, that if we aren't fruitful and don't multiply, we're talking multiply in a marriage, in a Jewish marriage, that the marriage is not fulfilled. It's that something should be done. Do you know what I'm talking about? What I've heard from our beliefs and traditions, and maybe halacha? I don't know. But exactly, I would ask you for direction on that. That if a marriage is not producing children, whether, and that could mean not natural children, it could mean the adopted children. That leads into the next issue, separate and also combined with this. So we don't need to address the adoption point issue really. But I thought we must produce children if at all possible, and if we don't, that something needs to be done to correct it.
Okay, so there's a command.
Okay, to have children. Okay, again, the technicality is a command. The command is on the male, it's on the female. Whereas, what the point is, and that's my focus between the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi.
The point is, I'm not going to get into details. Yes, there's a concept of that a couple should strive to have children. Yes. So if a couple gets married and then makes a decision that they don't want to have children, okay, then that's problematic. That's clearly problematic. Okay, it's against the first mitzvah and so forth. I'm not going to get into any specific issues about this in specific cases and so forth and so forth. That's something different. You get into issues, it gets into much very powerful halachic issues in terms of what happens if a man falls in love with a woman who can't have kids. Should they get married? Okay, should not. The fact of the matter is that's a lot of big halachic question because there's a value in what we call the zivig as well. There's a value in the relationship, and also the fact is that this man. The fact that the man is in love with this woman, you can't specifically say, okay, just go out there and marry anyone who's of childbearing age. The point of the matter is, and you have this constantly brought up, the fact is, if a man has not found the love of his life, should he just go and marry anyone to have kids? No. Okay? The point is, this is a much more complicated issue in terms of the love of the couple and having kids, and the balance of it. But under normal circumstances, yes, it's expected that when a couple get married, that they'll have kids. Okay? And there's a halacha to that effect. Okay, the halacha to that effect is that on the surface, and it's not so simple, it's a very complicated technical law, is after 10 years, if a couple does not have kids, then there's an argument that the husband has to divorce the wife. Okay? So the point is that comes up many times. Okay, if a couple's been married for 10 years and they haven't had children, the prima facie law would be that there might be necessity of divorce. The truth is that rarely comes to fruition because we value the relationship. The fact is one of the great sources for that in terms of valuing the relationship outside of having kids is from Yaakov Avinu and Rachel. When Rachel comes to Yaakov and says, I don't have kids, and she's very upset and so forth, Yaakov basically dismisses her. If you look at the psukim, it seems to be Yaakov is very dismissive. The point is if you look at a commentary called the Akedah Yitzchak, he's extremely powerful. He says, listen, he basically says your value is not just as a baby maker. Seems to be his argument to Rachel. You have value as a woman. You have value as my wife. Okay. It's up to Kosh Baruch Hu hasn't given you children. Hopefully one day he will. But the point is that's not your only value. It's a very powerful statement by the Akedah Yitzchak. The point is, who was basically from the Middle Ages, a powerful commentary on Chumash, a philosophical commentary on Chumash, very worthwhile. The point is that there is a surface, but the fact is you have to remember
there's a relationship involved.
yes, there is a concept. You have kids and so forth. Now it should be pointed out
that adoption doesn't have this standing. Okay?
in halacha,
There's no such thing as halachic status of an adoptive child. Okay? So if you
don't have kids,
and you want to adopt, clearly it's a value in that because there's a value in the
chesed you wish to show to the children who need to be taken care of, and there's obviously reflective of your value to be a
parent and to connect to others and so forth.
But the relationship is not one of parent and child, so it's something a little bit different. But the point is, it's still a relationship of unity. With a lot of what I'm saying,
this is not to take away from the fact that there is a concept of caring for self and caring for others. There is a concept of chesed.
There's a concept of caring. The fact is
that unity comes about to the fact that we value the other. Okay? The point is that
there's obviously
a recognition of value of the other. And there's a balancing of balancing yourself and the other. And that doesn't necessarily mean
that you don't it has to be 50-50 or something like that. It's much more part of the what do you call it, the workings of the greater community, greater unit, the family relationship. Okay, the point is that every unity has their own dynamic. Okay, taking into account the different individuals. Okay, every marriage is different. In some marriages it looks like the husband is being dominant, the other marriages looks like
the wife's being dominant. The fact that matters, every unity is
different. But the fact is
that there's a concept that love creates a unity.
It's not just a matter of being
selfless, it's a matter of creating the unity
and the unique union of that couple. Stephen, you want to say something? Yes, sir. Stephen? You're not muted. You're muted. Stephen, we're not hearing you. No one else wants to say anything? No? Stephen, we still don't hear you. You seem to want to say something.
Oh, maybe it'll stay unmuted. Oh, okay. So you mentioned the unique. You don't need to discuss this at all if it's not relevant. But Rabbi Gershon's edict, which ended and then was reinstituted, is talking about a different people. Well, no, not really. It's talking about rabbinic Jews, which he was a rabbi that made that edict, which was accepted in Ashkenazic Judaism, I believe, and maybe not quite the same way, if at all, in the Sephardim. But I'm of course against having many partners, and was it a growth period that those Hebrews, those ancient first Jews went through, the biblical Jews, to have that? Was the culture around them?
Okay.
Stephen, let me phrase the question. Okay,
because the way you're doing it is not good. What you're really raising is the issue of polygamy. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, so the fact is
that what I'm talking about, from Adam and Chava, is Ein Tovei Olam Levado, and they created one couple. And therefore there's an idea of the specific
relationship between one husband and one wife,
in the relationship monogamy, and therefore everything flows from that, and that's an aspect of a special relationship and so forth.
What you then develop is
there's a concept within Judaism
of polygamy. It's a concept also that
allows in terms of the Noahide world. In the
Noahides, and
according to Torah, polyandry, which is more than one husband, is not acceptable. That's for sure prohibited.
Polygamy is acceptable for Noahides and acceptable
for Jews.
Technically. Okay? Now, the point is that from a Jewish perspective, it would seem to be that while polygamy was permitted, okay, it was not the ideal. Okay? Let's look at some classic examples of this. The truth of the matter is, it's stated that I think there was that the people of the Talmud basically did not practice polygamy, even though it was permitted. Okay, if you look in terms of the biblical world, okay, so you have Shlomo Melech had many wives, and obviously, but the fact of the matter is, if you look in terms of the Avot, in terms of the forefathers of the Jewish world, Avraham Avinu only practiced polygamy when Sarah insisted upon it. Okay, and there's an issue with that. Okay, Yitzchak Avinu only had one wife. Yaakov, it seemed, only wanted one wife, but then he got fooled by Lavan, and then he had more than one wife. But it seems to be polygamy is not an ideal within Judaism. Okay, monogamy is. Moshe Rabbeinu only had one wife, and you go through it. Basically, the great leaders, most of the great leaders within Jewish thought only had one wife. What you're raising is the issue of polygamy. Can a polygamist? It's looked upon as acceptable within Jewish law, but not an ideal. What happened is that it was never prohibited until Rabbeinu Gershon made an edict that basically said we shouldn't be practicing polygamy anymore. The point is that was that an argument basically that we should follow a higher ideal? Possibly. Okay? The fact of the matter is, he thought maybe this was the time to actually enforce polygamy, enforce monogamy. There's other arguments that they lived in that basically his world was Christian Europe, and since all the Christians were practicing monogamy, it was better for the Jews perhaps also to practice monogamy. The point is that this leads into a much more complicated issue of how we understand, love within marriage standing in terms of polygamy. It's a further definition of love. It's still a unity. It's still a certain concept of that connection, and monogamy is obviously a higher ideal within Judaism. The point is that polygamy still is a reflection of a love that reflects a unit. Okay, the point is the polygamous relationships of Yaakov Avinu. We have the Jewish people. Okay, and the aspect of unity. Okay, of the union of that peoplehood. The fact is that love, and I'm not in any way advocating polygamy. The point is, obviously, it's clear cut within Jewish thought that monogamy is the idea, and the idea of the opening statement is Adam and Chava was a monogamous relationship and so forth. The idea being that it was the concept that what I'm really getting at is that love emerges not from the idea of selflessness, emerges from a bonding. Okay, and really what we're talking about in terms of that bonding, and what I talk about in terms of mutuality and relating, is the fact that we have to consider that really it's not just saying I negate myself for the other, it's the fact that I want to actually connect to the other and be bonded with the other and creating a unity with the other, and that extends beyond the sexual unity of husband and wife into the unity of everything, and as Harold said, it actually leads into development of civilization. Okay, any more questions or? Okay, so we'll end it here. I hope this was worthwhile, and I guess we'll see you guys on Sunday. Give you a little hint. Okay, hold on one second.